Welcome to This Explainer. Have you ever looked around at your career or even just your life in general and felt like you're doing absolutely everything right? Putting in the long hours, solving the tough problems, checking all the boxes, but you are still just completely stuck? Well, today we're breaking down a fascinating source that explores exactly why simply working hard is not always enough to move your life forward. We're going to talk about this really powerful shift from playing a finite game, where you're basically just trying to beat everyone around you, to playing an infinite game, where you compete with the absolute most stubborn opponent out there, yourself. To really understand this, let's talk about a guy named Robert. Robert is 33 years old, and he's been at his manufacturing company for a decade, 10 years. He is absolutely the go-to guy. When a machine breaks down or a shipment is running late, Robert is the one management calls to fix it. He knows the systems inside and out. So obviously, when an operations manager position opens up, he assumes it's his. I mean, he's earned it, right? But he doesn't get it. The job goes to Michael, a guy who's been there for less than 3 years. Robert is completely blindsided by this. And the real sting here isn't just that he lost the promotion, it's that for the very first time in his entire career, he literally cannot explain why. Section 1. The Illusion of Comfort. So Robert sits down with his manager Daniel to ask why he was passed over, and it turns out there is this massive disconnect between how Robert sees his own value and how Daniel sees his potential. Daniel tells him, "You're very good at what you do, but you're not ready for what comes next." You see, Robert is playing a finite game. He thinks because he's so good at solving today's problems, he automatically wins a better title. But Daniel recognizes that managing daily fire drill emergencies is a totally different skill set than handling tomorrow's strategic responsibilities. Robert was highly effective, for sure, but he was stagnant. Robert takes all this frustration home to his wife, Claire. He's venting, complaining that he has done absolutely everything the company has ever asked of him. And Claire delivers this piercing observation. She tells him, "You've done everything they asked you to do. I'm not sure you've done everything you could have done to become the person you wanted to be." Wow. Let that sink in for a second. Doing the bare minimum, even if that minimum involves really hard work, is just an illusion of growth. Fulfilling your job description keeps you employed, but it does not inherently force you to evolve. Section 2. The Real Competition. A few days later, Robert is at a local coffee shop and bumps into Samuel Grant, who is a former plant director turned consultant. Robert starts venting again, admitting he's beating himself up for not understanding why he lost the job. Samuel zeroes right in on the actual issue. He tells Robert, "Look, your manager wasn't saying you aren't valuable. He was saying that your current version isn't ready for your desired future. Robert's problem isn't the company. It isn't the new guy, Michael. It isn't the system. The bottleneck to Robert's growth is, well, Robert." When Robert desperately asks how to fix this, Samuel gives him this one core directive. Challenge yourself to do something every day that asks more from you than yesterday did. And he clarifies something incredibly important here. You don't do this just because discomfort is some magical character-building cure. You do it because without resistance, you simply have absolutely no biological or psychological reason to grow. If your environment doesn't demand more of you, your capabilities are going to stay exactly where they are. Section 3. 5 Rules of Growth. Samuel gives Robert a highly actionable roadmap to completely rewrite his professional DNA and start competing internally rather than externally. Here are his rules. 1. Comfort keeps you where you are. 2. Consistency makes change permanent. 3. Struggle develops capacity. 4. Keeping promises to yourself rebuilds self-respect. And 5. Patience teaches you to continue when the results are still invisible. Let's look at how Robert actually puts these into practice. Let's start with Rule 1. Samuel tells Robert that his first challenge isn't to go out and climb Mount Everest, it's literally just to find the places at work where he's gotten too comfortable. Robert quickly realizes he always avoids presenting ideas to senior management. He much prefers hiding behind his reports. So he steps up and volunteers to present a finding to Daniel. He also asks Daniel for direct, unfiltered feedback. And Daniel tells him something fascinating. He says Robert always waits until he has absolute certainty before making a decision. Actually, in operations, by the time you have absolute certainty, it's usually way too late to make the decision anyway. Robert realizes his biggest weakness wasn't a lack of technical skill, it was his habit of protecting his own ego. He avoided situations where he might look inexperienced. True growth requires you to be willing to look a little foolish while you learn. Moving on to Rule 2, consistency. Robert sets a few realistic, private promises for himself.
30 minutes of study, 20 minutes of exercise, reading 10 pages of a book, and putting his phone away for 30 solid minutes with his family. The real test comes on day 4. He has a brutal, exhausting day at work and gets home late. The old Robert would have definitely said, skip tonight, I'll just start fresh tomorrow. But he remembers Samuel's advice. You don't need a perfect day. You just need to keep the promise. So he reads 5 pages instead of 10. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't impressive, but he did it. And that is a massive takeaway for all of us. Consistency isn't about proving you can be perfect, it's about refusing to let one imperfect day turn into an abandoned promise.
Section 4. Embracing the struggle. Now, Robert had this deeply ingrained habit. Whenever things got frustrating, he immediately looked for an escape hatch. If a project was too tough, he wanted to step back. Samuel points out that when life gets difficult, most of us automatically ask for an easier day. But what if, instead of asking for an easier day, you asked for the strength to handle the day you were actually given? Think about it. Escaping resistance just asks for ease, but using resistance builds actual strength. A difficult day can either take something from you, or it can build something in you. It all depends on whether you run from it or use it as training. So Robert starts forcing himself to sit with frustration long enough to actually get better at handling it. Which leads us directly to Rule 4, perfectly anchored by this quote from Samuel. Your hardest promises are the ones nobody else can enforce. Nobody at the office knows if Robert reads those extra pages at night. Nobody is going to write him up for skipping his workout. But that is exactly why keeping those promises matters so much. Every single time Robert follows through, when no one is watching, he's building undeniable evidence of his own reliability. Self-respect isn't built through cheap positive thinking or standing in front of a mirror doing affirmations. It's built through repeated, quiet proof that your own word actually means something. Section 5. The true victory. By the 3rd month, Robert is putting in the work, but he's getting pretty impatient. His relationship with his wife is better, sure, and he's learning a lot, but that promotion hasn't magically appeared. He starts wondering if any of this is actually doing anything. He complains to Samuel, and Samuel gives him a stark reality check. He says, you are measuring a tree by looking at it every morning. Just keep watering it. How long? Well, long enough that you no longer need to ask. That's Rule 5, patience. There are simply no dramatic shortcuts to profound structural change in your life. You just have to keep going while the results are entirely invisible.
And then the payoff finally happens. Months later, Daniel calls Robert into his office. He's noticed a massive shift in Robert's behavior. Robert then was the hero. He solved every single problem himself. He was playing a finite game, competing purely for a shiny new title. But Robert now, he makes the people around him better at solving problems. He's adopted an infinite mindset. And because of this invisible transformation, Daniel finally offers him the operations manager position. Robert realizes he simply hadn't been ready before, because he was just trying to beat his coworkers, rather than challenging himself to become a better leader.
When Robert tells Samuel about the promotion, he admits something kind of surprising. He feels grateful, but he doesn't feel wildly different. Samuel smiles and tells him that's because the promotion was never the actual point. The real victory is that Robert no longer needs a new title to prove he's growing. Just look at how Robert measures his success now. Did he do something difficult today? Did he keep his private promises? Did he use a frustrating day as training? Did he keep going when absolutely no one was clapping for him? That is the real competition. He's no longer competing with Michael or anyone else at the plant. He's competing with the version of himself that wants to remain unchanged. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to turn this directly over to you. Maybe you aren't terribly unhappy with your life, but you know deep down you are capable of more. Maybe comfort has become so familiar that you don't even recognize it as a cage anymore. Look, don't try to change your entire life in 1 week. Start small. Keep just one private promise today. And when you hit that inevitable frustration, stop asking how to make it easier. Ask yourself, what is this difficulty trying to teach me today? Challenge that version of yourself that keeps choosing comfort over growth and adopt the infinite mindset of becoming just a little bit better than the person you were yesterday. Because at the end of the day, that is a competition worth winning.